Welcome back to another Voiceflow tutorial video. Today we are going to be going over how to add logic, conditionals, and variables into your Voiceflow projects. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, let's say, for example, you want to have a different voice experience every session that the user had. On the first session, you might ask the user, welcome to the skill, what is your name? And then on the second session, you can actually use that name that you'd captured to welcome them back by their first name. That would be a much better, more personalized voice experience, and we can do that in Voiceflow using conditional logic and variables. And we're going to do all that from scratch right now. So here we are on the Voiceflow dashboard. I'm actually going to go ahead and create a new project, and I'm going to call this Logic Test. Select which regions I want to be activated, and we're going to start the project. Okay, so here we are on our Voiceflow canvas. I did forget to add this in our last video, so I'll say it now. You can actually access keyboard shortcuts by hitting this little star right here in the bottom left. And so you see we have copy, paste, save, redo, comment, multiple block selection, and the ability to add blocks really quickly using space. So you can see right there. So lots of fun stuff in that keyboard shortcut. But getting back to our logic here. First thing we want to do is actually split up the user's session using a session variable. So we're going to pull in an if block, and an if block creates what's called a conditional statement or an if statement, and it essentially works like this. If this is true, then do this. If that's not true, then do this. Else, do this. And so what we'll actually do here is we'll create a conditional statement using the sessions variable, and I'll go into depth about what this is in a couple seconds. And we'll say if sessions is equal to 1, then we're going to go down this else port. We'll say if sessions is equal to 10, then we're going to go down this second port, and all the other times just go down this else port. Okay, so that is what a conditional logic is. We're setting conditions that are true, and depending on if they're true, that different path is going to be activated. Now, you might be wondering, what is sessions in this case? Well, in this case, sessions is a variable. If you're not familiar with programming or you need a refresher, variables are essentially containers. They are ways to store data. And so what we can actually do is we can store, for example, a name in a name variable that we call name. And then throughout the rest of our Alexa skill, rather than having to ask the user what their name is again, or have to manually type it out in a speak block, we can simply use the container name. And so we'll actually do that example in a second. So on the user's first session, they're going to go down this number 1 port, and so we're going to ask them, we're going to welcome them to the skill. Since it is their first time, we'll say welcome to the skill, and then we'll ask them, what is your name? So for here, we're going to want to create a variable, so create a container for the data. So we're going to call this name. And again, this is over on the left tab over here. You'll see we have our blocks menu, flows menu, which is a later video, and our variables menu. And we're going to create the name variable like I just did. You'll see we also have some built-in variables, these variables right here, which you can't delete. Those are variables that Voiceflow gives you right off the bat to access and use, such as the sessions variable. You saw that we didn't have to make it, it was already there for us to start using. So we're going to go back to our blocks menu here. What is your name? And now we're going to want to use a capture block. So I'm going to pull this out. And what the capture block does is it allows us to capture what the user says and actually store that response within a variable. Again, like putting information inside of the container. So we're going to link these two up. And we're going to specify what are we capturing. We have to say what kind of data are we looking for. And this just makes it a little bit easier for Alexa to know and match exactly the word that the user is saying so that it's stored properly. So in this case, we're capturing a name, and so we're going to go down to US first name, and that is the data type that we're going to be capturing. Now there are some cases where the data type that you are looking for is not available, and in that case you're going to want to use a custom data type, and you can just enter a bunch of examples, like let's say it's a restaurant menu. You might say sandwich, you might say burger, or a hot dog, or all these different examples that you are manually inputting. And in this case, Alexa is going to listen to what the user says and try to match it to one of the examples you had fed it. Once it takes, but in this case we're going to use the name though, which is super helpful as there are millions of names that we would have to type, but thankfully we have this data type already for us. So we're going to use US first name. What we're going to do here is capture the input of the US first name that the user says into our name variable. Great. So now what's happening in our Alexa skill is the user is going to start. If it's their first session, they're going to go up here. We're going to ask them, welcome to them to the skill, ask them what their name is, and then we're going to capture their response, which will hopefully come out in a name format, into the name variable. The last thing we want to do is actually greet them by name. So we'll say, nice to meet you. And now we can actually pull open our variable menu by entering the first parentheses. And we can actually type in name to find the variable we want. And just like that, it's going to store the user's name in that name variable and then use it to actually greet them by name. So let's go ahead and actually test this out. So we're going to go to our testing tab and we're going to start the test.
Welcome to the skill. What is your name?
So you'll see right there, because if we pull open the settings, you'll see our sessions variable is equal to 1. This is our first session. You'll see that name is equal to 0 right now because we haven't actually captured the name. So what actually happened was we went down this number 1 route because on our if block, this is our first session. Now Alexa is asking us for our name. So I'm going to type Braden.
Nice to meet you, Braden.
Then you'll see what happened was Alexa went ahead and captured Braden into the name variable and then used the name variable to actually say the response back to us. So that was a super simple way to use variables, create a variable, and actually capture a variable. Now we're going to do one more quick example to show you what another thing you can do with variables, which is actually doing math and arithmetic. So this won't get too complex, but we're going to go back to our dashboard, and we are going to call this. Oh no, we hit our project limit. So I'm just going to remove this old project right here. Okay, funny little example for that to come up. So now what we're going to do is call this score test, and we're going to create this project. Okay, so here we are. And so now what we can actually do is we're going to, based off whether the user answers a question correctly or not, we're going to increase the value of a variable. So this is a different way to use variables. So we're going to ask the user a question. We'll say, welcome to the quiz. Let's ask them, what do we want to ask them? What is the color of the sky? From here, of course, we're going to use a choice block because we are asking the user a question. And then from here, if the user says blue, or they'll say the sky is blue, or blue sky, or maybe the answer is blue, answer is blue. Any of those answers will trigger the correct response, which will be our number 1 path. And anything else is wrong because the only answer in this case is blue. And so we're going to bring them down a wrong path. Now, if we want to actually capture the score of the user, what we can do is go to our variables tab and create a new variable called score. And so what we're going to do is every time the user says a correct answer, we are going to increase the value of the score variable, and if they don't get it right, we're going to do nothing. So let's test this out once. So if the user says the wrong answer, we're going to say wrong answer. And then we're going to actually relabel this block as well. We're going to call this wrong and bring this up here. I'm going to copy paste this block, bring this down here, and now I'm going to call this right answer. And I'm going to say correct. The sky is in fact blue. Oh, blue. Oh, blue. There you go. Okay. Now we need to actually add in a set block in between here. And what the set block is going to allow us to do is increase the value of our variable. So set blocks allow you to essentially set, oh, sorry about Set blocks allow you to set the value of a variable, increase the value of a variable, multiply it, or really do whatever you want to that variable. You're essentially changing the value. That's what a set block does. And so in this case, we're going to set the value of score to equal score plus 1. So we're increasing score to be score plus 1. And so by setting score equals to score plus 1, logically that is we are increasing the value of score. So once we do that, we are then going to go down to write, say correct the sky is in fact blue. And we're actually going to add let's add a new segment here saying wrong answer, your score is score. And then if they get it right, let's say your score is score. Okay, great. So now just to run through this really quickly conceptually, and then we'll run it through on the actual test simulator. We are saying, welcome to the quiz, what is the color of the sky? If the user says blue, that is the only correct answer. We are going to increase their score variable by 1. And then we're going to say, correct, the sky is blue, and your score is score variable. So we are going to repeat the value of their score back to them. If they get it wrong, we're going to say wrong answer, your score is score variable, and again, repeat whatever information is stored within that score variable. So let's actually go ahead and run this. We're going to start the test.
Welcome to the quiz. What is the color of the sky?
And I'm going to say red.
Wrong answer. Your score is 0.
Oh no, okay, we got it wrong. So let's retest.
Welcome to the quiz. What is the color of the sky?
And I'm going to say blue. Oh, I guess our voice input isn't working on this one. I'm going to type blue. That is taking a couple seconds here.
Correct. The sky is in fact blue. Your score is 1.
And there we go. So that is how we can actually use different setting logic and conditional logic to make our voice experiences a lot more powerful and a lot more personalized to the user. So to recap, we did 2 examples. We used an if block in the first example to separate users based off of their session number, which was a built-in variable. We learned about variables, what they are and how to use them. And in our last example, we actually went through how to increase the value of a variable and manipulate it using a set block. I hope this was helpful. In future videos, we're going to be going over more and more complex topics within Voiceflow, including flows, which is the ability to have separate flow diagrams within flow diagrams. So you can build very big and large complex projects easily using Voiceflow. I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you in the next video.